I think it was probably because of a bit of burnout in the NHS. A lot of opportunities out there, and there's a lot of systems which do work better than the UK. It just take up a lot of time sometimes. It's like a medical hobby. If you were painting it, that we were lazy and closed and hiding.
What's it really like being a cruise ship or ski expedition doctor, or getting involved in medical journalism and book writing as a doctor? Introducing Dr. Ellen Welch, a GP, author, and journalist appearing on platforms like Sky News and Channel 5. She's chair of the Doctors Association and previous cruise ship and ski doctor. In this episode, we explore the life of a cruise ship doctor, who it's for, but also how we can engage in medical journalism and advocate for change. We really enjoy chatting to Ellen, and we hope you do too.
So lovely to have you on, Ellen. So just before we start, can you introduce yourself and tell us about your journey?
Yep, of course. So hi, my name's Ellen Welch. I'm currently a GP. I've been a doctor for 20 years. I started off with a career path in emergency medicine, which led me to work on cruise ships. I've done various things, such as being a ski field doctor, an expedition medic, a festival doctor. But now I'm a GP. I'm a portfolio GP. I do a bit of writing. I do some volunteer work with the Doctors Association. And I do 6 sessions as a salary GP.
That's amazing. That's also such an interesting career. Let's just dive in. So you started off with emergency medicine and then you somehow got into the field of cruise ship doctor, ski doctor. How did you get involved?
Well, I think it was probably because of a bit of burnout in the NHS, which is often the way. Working busy shifts in emergency medicine, thinking there must be something else out there. And at the time, there was an advert I saw in the BMJ for a cruise ship medicine course. And it was an ex-cruise ship doctor who ran a course in London telling people about the job. And so I went along to that, and it all sparked off from there, basically. I needed a little bit more experience because to work on cruise ships, they ask for, well, 3 years postgrad experience. And then you have to be up to date with all of your kind of advanced life support certificates. But yeah, I finished my A&E exams in the end and then went off to work on cruise ships back in 2008.
Great. So, how did you get into all this ship doctoring business? Obviously, you saw the opportunity on the BMJ,
Yep.
and then did you apply to different cruises? How did it work from there?
Well, no, so the doctor who did the course, he had contacts with a company, so it was Carnival Cruise Lines, but obviously there's many and they all need doctors. So he put me in touch with their HR, their recruiter, and then I basically applied. I had an interview, and then I got the job. But I guess for people who want to do it now, you can just approach cruise ships directly. There's plenty of information online. And again, don't rely on me because it's a while since I did it.
Yeah.
But the usual requirements are that you've got at least 3 years post grad, post F2 year. Um, you need to be competent, up to date with your advanced life support, advanced trauma life support, pediatric life support, and you doing A&E obviously would be ideal. You need to have a bit of experience in suturing, casting, reducing fractures, things like that.
Well,
Basically, you need to be able to manage anything on board.
yeah. Are you the only doctor on board? Is that how?
No, well, I did a very short contract where it was just me on a very small ship, but the majority of the time there'll be another doctor there.
Okay.
So there's massive ships now. I think the biggest
Yeah.
ships can hold up to 9,000 passengers, so it's like a mini
Yeah.
city, and
True.
the number of medical staff depend on the size of the ship. So
Okay.
I was generally on a two-doctor ship with 5 nurses, sometimes as a medical secretary to help with the paperwork.
Okay. So if I were to go on a cruise, what would be the most ideal? Well, what from your experience is the best cruise as a passenger?
As a passenger,
As a
well, it depends
passenger.
what you want. It depends what you want. For kids, maybe Disney. Actually, I've never worked on Disney, but I think that would be good. Royal Caribbean was who I worked for mainly. They were great, a bit of an
Yeah.
all-rounder.
Right.
Celebrity cruises were quite nice. That was a bit more luxe.
Oh,
Um,
what's a
I've
celebrity?
never been on them again, but
Oh, it's just a
it's just the
brand.
name of the company.
Yeah, a company.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, but Virgin Cruises, I've not been on them, but that's adult only. So it depends what you're looking for.
Okay. And then which one was the best to work on and why?
Um, I like Royal. I
Mm.
like all of them. They all had differences because I was a bit of an independent contractor, so I could go to different companies. But then with Royal, if you can, they also cover celebrities, so I could work for them too. Um,
Okay.
But yeah, they were all pretty good.
Okay, cool. And what was sort of what was a day in the life of a cruise ship doctor? What was it like?
Yeah, well, I don't know, a bit of a cliche, but no day was the same. But there was a structure to every day. So you do a 3 hour clinic in the morning, a gap in the middle of the day, and a 3 hour clinic in the afternoon. But when you were on call 24, well, all day basically. You were on for 24 hours, and then your colleague took over. But there could be times when, if there was a medical emergency, you just had to come in and you helped each other out. On your day off, you weren't always off, so sometimes you did have to go and take part in drills, training. I was a senior doctor, so then meetings with other departments, all the kind of management stuff. Um, but you obviously did get to enjoy the ports and see the world, so you could get out and go on tours and visit the places that you're in. But from a medical point of view, that gap in the afternoon, it wasn't always a gap. So the nurses would be on call and be the first ones to take the calls from the guests. But if there was any injuries, accidents, you had to be on hand to go in and sort them out, basically.
And you mentioned you had to do some drills and training. What did that involve?
Yeah. Well, also, so it's the general safety of being on the ship. So every crew member has to know how to evacuate an emergency, how to use the lifeboats. We did fire training, so we had to kind of dress up in firemen's outfits and learn how to use the hoses. Um, and then we ran the medical training, so all crew members have to learn basic life support and CPR. Um, there's also lots of kind of masters inspections where you have to go and inspect the ship for accidents, which is not very medical, but then it's part of the kind of role of being a crew member. The medical team ran stretcher drills. So again, in emergency, the medical team is not big enough to be the stretcher team. We have to concentrate on the medical side. So non-medical crew members were trained up to be the stretcher team and learn how to maneuver patients and do manual handling basically. So we had to train them to do that every week basically. Um, yeah, so there was a lot of kind of other stuff alongside the medicine that you had to do as well.
And I feel like kind of the sound of the job does sound quite glamorous because although you are providing your medical care, you're also exploring the world while doing it. But what's kind of the unglamorous side to the job as a cruise ship doctor?
Well, probably as you say, you go, you've got a beautiful port coming up. So, oh, in Sydney today, yeah, I'm going to get out in Sydney. And then, oh, I can't, I've got a drill. Oh, there's a patient in extremis. I've got to look after them, which obviously you do, but you are doing it to see the world as well. So sometimes you miss out on the ports because the job comes first, essentially.
Mm.
Hmm. How do you balance it, I guess, with having a sort of social life, seeing your family and things like that? Does that happen? Is
Oh,
that
when I did it, it does. Some people do it with family. I didn't have a family at the time, so but there was lots of people on board who did. They left their family for months on end. Our contracts were 3 months generally, 3 to 4 months,
Hmm.
but some of the crew members were on board for up to 8 months without going home to see their family. Um, but I guess it depends on the stage of your life, what you're doing. We've got the internet, you can still keep in touch. I work with some doctors who brought their family on board. Um, so it's possible, but the cabins are quite small, and there was all four of them at one point in one cabin, which we do get bigger cabins as doctors, but it's still quite cozy when you've got your whole family in there.
Mm.
But there's various ways of doing it, and I guess it depends what stage of life you're in and what you're looking for.
And how did the role kind of shape you personally and also professionally and change your view on medicine?
Well, actually, probably massively, because obviously I was trained in the NHS, so I've come from an NHS mindset where you don't really think about the cost of things. And it's an American company. All of the companies charge for medical care on board, and that was a massive eye opener. Just realizing what we've got in the way of the NHS. So every patient that came to see me, guest, the crew are free. We look after the crew for free, obviously, but every guest who came to see me had to pay um at least $100. And there's lots of talk within the NHS about charging people to see a GP, charging people for missing appointments. And I very much disagree with that. The theory is that you should charge them and they'll evaluate, or they won't miss appointments, or if they're paying for it, they will come. And that's not the case. I think people on board would pay $100 to see me. I've mentioned this case before, but there was a young guy who had a black fleck in his nail, and he paid $100 to see me, and it was a piece of dirt, and all I did was remove it. But he was worried, was it cancer? What was it? And he was happy to pay $100, and the same thing would happen in the NHS. I think the people who've got money will pay for it, and then there's people who don't who suffer. So there was another case of a lady who had come to the front desk to see the nurses, not feeling very well, asked how much it cost to see the doctor, and then decided, oh, I can't afford it, went away. And then later that night, we had an alpha call, which was an emergency call, summoning us to her cabin, and she was in extremis and unwell, and that possibly could have been prevented if she'd been able to afford to seek the care earlier. So it did make me think about the differences in healthcare systems around the world, and we do complain about the NHS, but it does have some advantages.
Yeah, definitely when you think about its application within the NHS, like a lot of people talk about, for example, charging for emergency missions. So if you're going to A&E, to reduce the amount of people who go there and to help with waiting times, making people pay to kind of go in. So then people who actually feel like they've got a serious condition will go into A&E. So that would reduce the amount of admissions. But actually, like you said, the people who have the money, okay, can afford to do that. But those who don't have the money will then wait until they're in the most serious situation, and then at that point it's very hard to kind of go back and rectify the health
Exactly,
care, right?
definitely. And people don't know where doctors were trained, and I sometimes think we forget the amount of experience we have. People don't always know what's serious and what isn't, and what we think is serious, or what a patient thinks serious, where you might think, well, that's clearly fine, and that's our job, isn't it? And people don't know.
And what I guess on the other end of that, what is the sort of craziest most bonkers thing that you've seen on
On ships.
on a ship?
Oh
Yeah.
God. Um, oh, you put me on the spot now. Well, again, thinking of the NHS payment, the probably one of the things that I affected me the most was we had a very unwell patient. She basically had come in seriously unwell. She needed thrombolysis. She needed really a cath lab she was having an MI, and she was basically peri-arrest. So we had to give her thrombolysis. And just as I was about to give it, the nurse pulled me aside and kind of said to me, if you asked her husband if they can afford this, because the vial cost $7,000. It was $7,000 a vial basically. So I had to then go and have that conversation with him. Are you happy to pay $7,000 for your dying wife to have this medication which can save her? And it's just one of those conversations you never really, well, you don't have to have it in the NHS. You just give the medication that they need. Um, so that definitely stuck with me. I think you were probably asking for a more light-hearted case, but
No,
have a
no.
think. I'll come back to that one.
I think there's sometimes it's those cases that hit you the hardest though, right? It makes you grateful for the system that we have in the
Sure.
NHS compared to other healthcare systems around the world. And that actually, okay, although we are going through struggles within the NHS, which we can maybe talk about a bit later with some of the books that you've published, we do have to actually celebrate the wins of what's amazing about the NHS at the
Yeah,
moment, how it is helping a significant portion of society who ultimately would not be able to have the healthcare they need if it wasn't
yeah.
for free healthcare.
No, for sure.
Very interesting. And into you as an author,
Mhm.
different, completely different thing. How did you get into that or start that? Have you always been writing? Yeah.
Yeah, so I did want to be a journalist actually before I was a doctor, but when I was a medical student, there was the option to intercalate in medical journalism.
Oh,
So
wow.
there was a degree at the University of Westminster, and I did that for a year. So that kind of got me into it, and it all came from there. I just kind of made contacts and started doing a lot of writing then.
Hmm.
And I guess with writing, a lot of the time there is a bit of luck involved. And I did work experience at Nurse and Standard as part of my placement for the degree, and I wrote an article on venous thromboembolism. And then somebody approached me based on that article to write a book. And at the time, I was like, "Well, I can't write a book on this." But often they were looking for someone to write a book, and they wanted it to be easily accessible rather than someone who knew everything about the subject. And so I did it, and I was no expert, but then it just got me into writing and realizing actually this is how you do it. And when I had other ideas for books in the future, I had an idea of how to write a pitch and who to approach, and got into it that way basically.
Mm. So what's the process then of writing a book? So, because I think ultimately we think, okay, all it is just, putting pen to paper, gathering all the pages together, writing it up. But there's so much more that goes behind it. Like you said, pitching it to the different publishers, making your
Yeah.
adjustments, etc. So, what's kind of the process?
Well, I guess that's the first thing really, just find out that somebody wants you, will publish your books. There's no point in writing it if it's not going to be published. So um writing kind of a pitch would be just writing the bullet points. So drawing out on paper why you're doing this book, what the competition is there a gap in the market, and then going through in bullet points the outline of each chapter and just basically making a plan about what you're going to write. And then that's what you pitch to the publishers. Um, and then they'll give you feedback, whether it's a yes or a no. And then once you've got the go ahead, then you go ahead and write.
Hmm.
What advice would you give to people who are at that stage where they need to pitch to the publishers? Like, are there any top tips you would give?
Well, I guess know your market. So I guess it depends what you're writing. If it's fiction, if it's a medical book. If it's a medical book, there are specific medical publishers. So I've written a few medical books with Skion, who are quite a small company, but they've always been very supportive, and they've actually asked me to write books before because they see the gap in the market. They know that that's what the people are after, and so they ask authors to fill that gap. Um, so for example, for the exam textbooks, it's quite a fast-moving market because the exams change quite a lot, and I've written exam textbooks with them before, and 10 years ago I wrote the first book and the exams completely changed, so they wanted me to rewrite the book. So I guess, yeah, pitch to the right people, like choose the right market and look what's out there already and see where your book fits in, how it can be different.
Is
Yeah.
is the motivation for you in writing come from sort of within, or is it the market research there, as you said? Because obviously, to some extent, there's going to have to be some sort of intrinsic motivation to it rather than
Well,
just.
exactly. And I think back in that first book, Venus from World was why on earth did I write a book on that? I haven't got a massive interest in it. But I think it was more the challenge initially of writing the book, like, oh yes, I'm gonna write a book. But then after that, it became more the topics and what I was interested in. This GP exam book was because at the time I was doing the exam myself and my colleagues didn't have a book there that
Yeah.
could help us. So we thought, right, we should write a book.
Mm.
Um, so I think that was probably the motivation for those ones. With the books I've done more recently, they're a bit more political. So why can't I say my GP is my latest book? And that was born from the work I was doing with the Doctors Association, which is a group of volunteer doctors who campaign for the NHS and doctors. And we'd spent a lot of time since the pandemic talking in the press and writing about what was going on in general practice. So that book came from that work really. And again, I was approached by a publisher to write a book about Nye Bevan and about Wales because they were a Welsh publisher, and then we were able to rejig things to make the book actually about general practice, about what was interesting me at
Mm.
that time.
So coming on to the books you've recently written, sorry, so Why Can't I See My GP, How the NHS Coped with COVID, NHS at 70, all those more political books. For those who haven't heard about them, what are the kind of key themes that you explore in them and the key messages you want people to take out of reading them?
Yeah, well, they're all slightly different. The first one is more of a history book, the NHS, the story so far, and again, I think the NHS is super complicated. Even for us, when we work in it, we're not really taught about it, and it's kind of making it more understandable. So breaking down the history, what it is, how it works into bite-sized chunks. So it just makes it a bit more straightforward. How the NHS coped with COVID was written during the pandemic, so it was kind of written in real time, and it's a lot of stories from people. So people's experiences. So it's a lot of first person pieces with a timeline of what went on in the pandemic. Um, and then why can't I see my GP? As I've already said, it was based on what's been going on in general practice, particularly since the pandemic. So there was a huge narrative during the pandemic that GPs were shut, lazy, closed, not doing anything, and again that couldn't have been further from the truth. And the Doctors Association was speaking out about that. So it's a full text about why things are so dire in general practice, the reasons for that. And it's again full of first person pieces from different GPs from around the country.
Like it seems like there's a lot of you're gonna have to take into account a lot of opinions and what's going on around the country. It seems like a lot of things that you sort of gonna have to amalgamate into a book. How did you sort of navigate finding out everything that you need to know in order to, put it into one clean synthesized book?
Because it's something we've been doing. I wrote it last year, it came out. I joined the Doctors Association in 2020,
Right.
and it's something we've just been doing the whole time. We'd been speaking to the press, we'd been writing various articles in the press. It was in the forefront of our mind what was going on and speaking out about it. So it was kind of there already, and it was just writing down the main points. And I'd made lots of contacts through the UK and lots of people who were happy to write pieces and be part of it. So it was just bringing all that together, really.
Right. And how do you think writing these books and having, I guess, as a result, a massive understanding of the NHS, how it's going and the state of it now, how do you think that's helped you as a doctor?
Um, I guess it's made me more politically aware because I think doing the job sometimes clinically, you put your head down and you just get on with the job.
Mm.
But having an awareness of the bigger picture sometimes and what else is going on, it makes it easier to say no if from a general practice point of view. Because as a GP, a lot of the time you are passed a lot of workload from secondary care. You get bombarded from all angles, being asked to do things. And often the reason given is it's for the best of the patient. You need to do this for the best of the patient. But it's made me be able to say, actually, no, this isn't in the best of the patient. This isn't the best use of my time.
Mm.
I'm not a house officer for secondary care. It's pushing back that workload is actually in the benefit of my patients because it means we've got more time to actually see patients and do what we need to do rather than absorbing all the other work from all of the angles. And again, speaking to people around the country, writing this book, this is what GP collective action is about. It's kind of saying to everyone, stop. We can't just be the kind of the end point for everyone. So everyone's like, go and see your GP, ask your GP. It's not always appropriate, and it is okay for us to say no because we can't do everything.
Mm. And do you think doctors have a duty to kind of engage in public discourse about healthcare issues, or do you think there's kind of a risk of speaking out sometimes?
Well, it's very personal. I don't think anyone should be compelled to do it. I think it is helpful to do it, but the nature of our job is we don't always want to speak because we're worried about issues of patient confidentiality, speaking out of turn. And I probably wouldn't have done it as a more junior doctor, but it is important because we need to get our side across about what is going on. Because the media narrative isn't always hearing our story.
On your most recent book, Why Can't I See My GP? Um, I am very reluctant to see my GP because I feel like I'm almost not worthy. Like, for instance,
Oh,
I'm currently suffering with hay fever, as you can probably tell on the call. And my eyes are watering things. I feel like it's quite minor, but none of the sorts of over-the-counter medications are really, really doing the trick.
yeah,
But I just like that sort of psychological, just sort of barrier. I feel like I'm wasting my time.
right.
I feel like it goes a long way as well. But what are the other barriers?
Well, again, and I don't think any GP wants that. That's our bread and butter. If you've tried all the over-the-counter things, it's not working, come and see us. We can have a
Yeah.
chat. That's our job. But I think there's so many barriers, isn't there? And it is difficult to get an appointment. And it's just maybe patients being aware things do work differently these days, and it will be different in every practice. But in my practice, it's all total triage. So every patient that contacts the practice has to do it via an online consult. If they can't do it themselves, a receptionist will fill it in. And there's a duty doctor who goes through every single contact to the practice and triages it. So yours would come in and you'd get an appointment. It wouldn't be same day, but it would be as a routine appointment, which could sometimes be in 3 weeks. And people might say, oh my God, it's 3 weeks. But those sorts of things can wait and you will get dealt with and you will get seen, but it may be a wait and it's kind of the expectations of people and what is it's something that needs to be seen, but the timescales might not be quite as quick as you'd like.
Yeah. In instances where maybe the timescales are longer than they ought to be, what do you think are the are the barriers that the salient barriers, I guess, in stopping patients seeing GPs when they actually need to?
What do you mean, sorry?
As in like a fairly serious issue. I would
Hmm.
give an example, but I don't want to I don't want to give the horrible one.
Well,
And but you know what I mean, like an acute issue that you could may need to be seen quite soon, but
yeah.
maybe isn't seen as soon as it ought to be by the GP because of barriers. What sort of barriers are the main ones, would you say, that contribute to that?
Well, so I think with this total triage system, most people are seen who need to be seen quickly, and that's why
Yeah.
this system's in place. So things can be triaged. So people who are sick and who do need to be seen will be seen often the same day or next day.
Mm.
But A&E GP is not an emergency service, so we do have people contacting us with central cushion chest pain, and it is entirely appropriate to redirect people to A&E. People sometimes aren't happy about that. I had an example maybe a few weeks ago, someone who contacted the surgery at 8 a.m. and asked for an appointment. They were given an appointment for that afternoon, but that wasn't quick enough. So they went to A&E, they got seen. I think they had cellulitis and they got antibiotics. And then when they got their call back that afternoon, um, they were unhappy that they'd got the call back then. And it's kind of sometimes it is too easy to get an appointment in some ways. There's too
Mm.
many ways to get seen, but it is entirely appropriate sometimes to go to A&E and get seen. If you're worried that you've got cellulitis, maybe that is you're not going to get seen quick enough.
Mm.
I don't know if that answered your question.
And how do we kind of balance the narrative? Because I think a lot of the time the media will portray a certain narrative. And then there are organizations, for example, like Doctors Association UK, that kind of then showcase that the reality from the doctor's first-hand perspective, right? So how do we kind of help with the media narrative that might not be actually the reality of what we see?
Yeah, well, I guess that's some of the work that we are trying to do with DUK. So we formed a relationship with the Medical Journalists Association, and again that goes back to my days doing the medical journalism degree. I became a member of MJA, and it's trying to work together with journalists. So we've got a conference coming up in May, and there's going to be medical journalists there, and one of the sessions is on doctors working with the media, and it is forming good relationships, and we can often feed stories to the media that members have come to us with, and do that confidentially, um, but also writing pieces ourselves and having links with journalists where we can write an opinion piece and have contacts who can help us publish it and get the message out there.
And I wanted to ask, so you've also written articles and opinion pieces for things like The Guardian, The Independent, The Times. How does writing for those kind of news outlets differ from writing for books?
Yeah, well, so it's much more pa fast paced. So you've got a deadline, you have to do a certain number of words. You have to be prepared for some brutal editing at times. So I've written a lot for Metro, which is a more of a tabloid theme. And sometimes you write an article, and then the sub editors come and they make it more dramatic and a bit more tabloidy, and you're like, oh God. But I think you just have to. Some people might not be happy with that, but at the same time, you get in the opinion out there, you're getting it into the press. There is a bit of a cringe factor sometimes with the headline, but that's who you're writing for. That's kind of your audience, and they need to make it a bit more sellable, really.
I just wanted to ask about your role as well at the Doctors Association.
Hmm.
Uh, what is that like? Yeah.
Yeah, so well, at the minute I'm vice chair. I've done a number of roles within the organization, and it's a voluntary thing. So it does take up a lot of time sometimes. It's like
Mm.
a medical hobby. Um, and it would be nicer to spend more time in it, but it's not possible sometimes. And yeah, sometimes you can get criticized because, oh, the DUK haven't said anything about this issue or that issue, but there's only a certain number of hours in the day, and everyone involved is doing it
Mm.
aside their NHS jobs and families and everything else in their lives.
Yeah.
But it's just a great group of people who are passionate about the causes in the NHS, and it is quite amazing what we do often. Some of us haven't even met, but we meet online, and we have been able to speak up and make things make a difference really. So it's fab.
What sorts of campaigns and like initiatives are you most sort of proud about leading?
So well, when I joined, and this is probably why I joined during the pandemic, when we were going back to 2020, everyone was pretty terrified about COVID and the lack of PPE. And I just joined the organisation at that stage, but everyone at that point had set up a PPE app so doctors could report in real time about what the PPE shortages were. Um, and I don't know if you guys medical students then?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and there was a total lack of PPE, and again, especially GPs who were working, they were buying things from B&Q and wearing bin bags, and a lot of the first healthcare workers who died were GPs. But then the media were painting it that we were lazy and closed and hiding. Um, so again, the GP team formed during the pandemic, the DUK GP team, and I think I'm quite proud of the work that we did to raise awareness about what is going on in general practice and
Mhm.
speak out about that.
That's amazing. And if you could change one thing about how the UK values doctors, overnight, what would it be?
Oh wow. Um, well, just I guess exactly that to value doctors again. I don't know how you guys must feel at the minute coming into a workforce where you get moved around the country, you've got thousands of pounds worth of debt, you don't know what your rota is going to be a couple of weeks before starting. And then you've got kind of non-medical professionals who are taking on a lot of your training opportunities, who are kind of part of the team and sticking around. And we do need to go back to valuing doctors again and creating more opportunities for training, creating opportunities where doctors can be in one place for a decent amount of time, um, and not treated with sometimes disdain, I think it's doctors are just not valued as much as
Mm.
they used to be.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think also in addition to that, for example, the training posts, there's not now as many specialty training posts. And I've like for example, this morning I was on TikTok just scrolling through, and the amount of videos I saw from F3 doctors who are now having to take that year out because they haven't got a post, they haven't got a job.
Yeah.
And now there's that instability in the
Yeah.
job as a doctor, which you wouldn't have expected. Like you think when you're going into your medical degree, everyone says, "Yeah, you're going to be a doctor. You've got your career sorted. That's it." But now we're seeing so many doctors now having to work as Uber drivers, do all
Yeah.
these other different jobs because there are no training posts available.
It's so
Which is
short-sighted.
crazy.
Well, even when you finish training, for example, general practice, where we're crying out for GPs, but there's a unemployment crisis in general practice at the minute for exactly the reasons you say. There are staff, so non-doctor clinicians are being
Yeah.
given the jobs instead.
What are some like obviously it's a massive issue and it can't be fixed with one step, but what are some tangible things that you would try to action if you could?
To help with,
Yeah, to help with the situation, yeah.
oh goodness. Well, I guess it's investing in people. So again, I guess it takes money to make posts, but when you have a new team of doctors, I think when you're so busy within the NHS, it's easy to just not invest in them and not want to maybe spend time teaching them and training them because you haven't got time yourself. And it's an awareness that that time needs to be created, and whether it's from HR paying for the sessions for that to be done and putting a monetary figure on it, because often that's what might make the difference. But putting time aside to invest in trainees and invest in people, and again, things like bringing back doctors' messes and
Mm,
doctors' offices and not giving them bins to sit on, and making it more of a community in hospitals and making people feel valued.
yeah.
That's really important. I'm just reflecting on my placements, and even for example, like you said, the doctor's mess, the doctor's offices.
Mm.
Sometimes it's a little box room, and then you compare it to other workplaces where they have such nice offices, and
Yeah,
it makes you feel welcomed. It makes you feel valued.
yeah,
Just
for
the
sure.
the idea of, for example, having a coffee machine where you can get a coffee for free in the morning instead of having to like go out, etc. These like small things can just make that difference to
Yeah,
make you feel valued when you work.
but they're big things, really, aren't they? And I worked after my kind of F1 year. I went to New Zealand, and it was completely different vibe. And I'm sure you've spoke to people who've worked there before, but doctors were valued, and we all got meal tokens every day, so we could have a free lunch, free coffee. There was a doctor's mess every Friday. We had beers and pizza, and you weren't. It was a different kind of mindset, but it wasn't everyone focused on training. It was more about we're going to go overseas next year, take some time out, and it was more about the work-life balance, and yeah, that was important.
And what made you then, after that experience of going to New Zealand, come back here?
Why did I come back at that point? Good question. Just life at the time.
Okay,
Mm.
interesting. And what do you recommend people to kind of go out and explore different healthcare landscapes in different countries?
Sure, and I guess it depends on your personal circumstances, family, and funds, and all the rest of it. But for sure, I think there's a lot better. There's a lot of opportunities out there, and there's a lot of systems which do work better than the UK, and certainly Australia, New Zealand. You've got a nice beach there. You've got a bit of a better work-life balance. I remember going back to New Zealand, trainees and certainly consultants, they get funded. So all of the kind of extra CPT, advanced life support courses you have to do, it's funded and you get time put aside to do that. You get free parking, you get all these little perks which just add up and make you feel valued.
And talking about work-life balance, obviously you're also juggling a lot as a GP, as an author, as also, I guess, an advocate in the healthcare landscape. Must feel like you're spinning a lot of plates. So how do you kind of keep them all in the air without dropping them?
Yeah, pass. Good question. I don't always.
That's very fair.
It's what I can't really say. I
I
don't.
think, yeah, I think we asked that question to a lot of the doctors we have on the podcast because obviously they're doing so much. But I think your answer is probably the answer that most have because
Most people
I think
have,
we
yeah.
all are passionate about what we do and the different things that we do, and we make it work. There's no sort of structure to it
No,
oftentimes.
you just fit it
Um,
in where you can, really. Yeah.
And what kind of drives you to kind of take on all those opportunities?
Oh, I think it's probably a sense of injustice at times and kind of putting my ranty hat on, like, no, that's not right. Something must be done. And I kind of am someone who I'm not very good at saying no. So if some a project pops up or there's something wrong that needs to be right, I'm very much willing to pursue it.
Mm. And are there any kind of future projects in the pipeline?
Well, yes, books wise, again, I've taken on a book on um well, actually, I probably shouldn't say yet because I don't know if it's, but yes,
Yeah.
there are. Yes,
Awesome. No, thank you so much for this conversation. Really
no
enjoyed it.
problem.
Just to finish, ask you a couple of quick fire questions, I
Oh God,
guess.
I'm
What's
not very good
one?
at it.
Don't worry, no pressure. What is one piece of advice you'd give to medics looking to get into medical journalism?
Into medical journalism.
Yeah.
So write a lot, just anything that interests you, write about it, and the more you write, the better you get at it.
Okay. And one piece of advice you'd give for anyone looking into potentially working on a ship as a doctor?
Or ski doctor?
Oh, ski doctor.
Yeah.
So, well, get your A&E competencies in. Do your life support certificates because you're going to need to tick all those boxes to do it. Um, and you need to be prepared for anything really. So, just getting a broad-based background of skills is important.
Um, our show is called More Than Medics for a reason. So, what does More Than Medics mean to you?
Um, so medicine is more than a job. Um, I guess as I said before, I do medicine as my job, but I do it a little bit as my hobby too, which is a little bit sad, I guess, but it is something that I'm passionate about. It's a privilege to be a doctor and for people to come and tell you their life story and their problems and their worries, and it is kind of a vocation to do it. You're always going to be learning. You're always going to be learning new things. Things change. I think the guidelines have changed so many times since I qualified. You do always have to kind of be on top of it. But I guess this is why I do the voluntary work with the UK. This isn't a very snappy answer, is it? You wanted a quick fire one, sorry.
No, it's fine.
No, I guess I do the work with DUK. as a volunteer because I do care about it, and it is a job, but it's also people's lives, isn't it? And it matters, and that's why I do the voluntary work as well, because I do want to make a difference.
Thank you so much for
No
coming
problem.
on, Alan.
That's fine.
So interesting as well to hear about your journey, and we look forward to your upcoming projects.
Yeah, and I hope you feel better soon. Go and get yourself to the pharmacy.
Yeah, I'll sort
Be
it out.
consult.